Welcome back once again to See You in Heaven podcast with your hosts Helma and Kylie. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about being unequally yoked, and we're really excited for this episode. And as always, we've got some Bible verses for you guys. So without further ado, Kylie, take it away.
I realized we didn't pray before this one.
Oh.
But we could just say a quick little prayer right now, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you would be with the conversation that Telma and I have today. I pray that you would just guide our words and help us to just say everything in light of your truth and your word, and just bless this conversation. In your name I pray. Okay, now that we have that taken care of, I was talking to Aaron about this episode this week, and I was
And Aaron is your boyfriend,
yes,
for those people who don't know.
Yes, as if we haven't mentioned him every episode. But I was talking to him about what we were talking about this week, and I said that this episode was going to be about being unequally yoked, and he didn't know what that meant. So, and then Brent was just walking through the kitchen, and he also said that he didn't know what that word meant before too. So I feel like we should start with the definition of what that means.
Yes.
So being unequally yoked means to be in a situation that binds you to the decisions and actions of people who have values and purposes incompatible with Jesus's values and purposes. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to be talking about in this episode is a non-Christian dating, a Christian dating a non-Christian, or vice versa. Basically, a dating relationship where two people don't believe the same thing, and what the dangers are of that, and what's right versus what's wrong, and like where do you draw the line, that sort of thing. So
the Bible verse that we picked for today is 1 Corinthians 6:14, and it states, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what do fellowship can light have with darkness?" So I really believe that being equally yoked with another believer is a fundamental necessity for just living life and living life as a Christian. Because if you are, with a non-believer, they're never going to understand your point of view and like the way that you view the world. If you go through a traumatic thing in your life and you're just like have the most peace that you've ever felt in your life, and it's the most tragic event that you've ever experienced, and you try to tell your partner that, and they're just like, what? Like, how could you feel that way? Like, that's, they're never going to understand, and they're never going to see the world through your eyes.
Yeah. It makes living life so different for the two people, like on earth, just like you said, getting through trials and just, everyday stuff. But also then, like, how do you have like a heaven focus with someone who doesn't know Jesus? Like, you're not going to the same place then. And like, I don't know how you reconcile that if this is the person that you love the most in your life and you don't like know if they're going to end up in the same spot as you, if they're not going to go to heaven with you, then I think that's really sad. And it's so hard to change people's minds on things sometimes. So if you are dating someone or engaged someone or just now married to someone and they don't know Jesus but you do, and you think that over time you can change them, like you might be able to, but you also might not be able to, because some people just put up really strong walls against religion and against Christ, and so that can be really...
This just came to be. But I also think too, when like you are unequally yoked with somebody, God is your first love. And, if you are giving God all of your love, all of your attention and all of that, what if it makes the other person jealous? Like, they're never going to understand that God has to be first in your life, and like that God is your first love. And I just feel like, like fundamentally, you're just never going to see eye to eye on things. Yeah. And understand, like, hey, God comes first before me, before your family, before anything else. But yeah.
I wrote down in my notes that who we choose to be our spouse is the second biggest relationship decision we'll make following choosing a relationship with Christ. Because you're right, he needs to be first, and then the person that you marry should obviously be second. And so if we're dating with the intention of marrying, which is something that honestly I feel like a lot of people our age don't really do. Like, they think, well, we're dating now and we're going to see where this goes. I'm not sure if I want to marry him or not. Like, I guess you don't need to be positive that you're going to marry him, but you want to make sure that it's someone that you would marry if you're going to start the dating process with someone. But we just try on and try so many different people out, seeing if it's a good fit for us. And I feel like that's where dating culture is really not like in line with what God would desire for us today. Because I think we've gotten really good at dating as a society, because there's so many ways to date, and people date long distance, and you can meet people in so many different ways. But I think we've actually gotten a lot worse at dating, because we're just basically playing house with everyone that we date nowadays, and really like actually yoking ourselves to someone. I don't know if that's a real phrase.
It sounds right.
To someone without the commitment of marriage. And then I feel like that's how people end up getting unequally yoked more and more today than maybe before. But I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of like when I first started dating, it seems a little harsh, but like one of the first questions would be like, do you believe in God? Like, are you a believer? And if they weren't, I would stop talking to them. And I can understand why some people would be like, you just need to have a little bit more patience, or, you need to see the good in people, because what if you could have led them to God? But also, that's not my responsibility. I am, I'm not here to change you and make you accept God. It's God's job to save you. And if I could have planted a little seed in that person, and maybe they were like, wow, like she is so like passionate about her faith that she won't even like date people that aren't Christians, then maybe they in some weird way could be like, wow, like I want to have that type of like relationship with God, or where I could put God first above like anything else. And I also think it's just such a big rabbit hole, like once you start dating somebody and you could give them the benefit of the doubt, where you think that they could become a believer later on. It's there's so many other ways where that could go wrong. But yeah,
it's tricky, because I knew I was going to ask you this question about what you think if there's ever an instance where a non-believer can start to date, or same difference. Yeah. A believer can start to date a non-believer and then hope that along the way they come to know Christ, like if that's ever a good idea. And I mean, I guess you kind of just said your piece there, but my parents, so I've told you this before, but my mom did not know Jesus when she started dating my dad. She was, I think, 16, and my dad was 19, I think, 18 or 19 when they started dating. And my mom grew up mostly raised by a single mom, and my grandma didn't know Jesus. Maybe my mom would go to church like once a year for like a holiday or something, but she really didn't know Jesus. And my dad had been raised in a really strong Christian household. And so my dad's parents really, instilled in my dad and my uncle that they wanted them to date Christian women, like godly women. But my dad got kind of set up with my mom, and he started liking her. And I guess I should have asked her specifically how long it took for her to like come to know Jesus. But I know like from the beginning of their relationship, it was made a point that my dad would bring her to church, and that, she would come to know Jesus that way. And I know my grandparents prayed every day for my dad and my uncle, praying that they would meet, Christian girls so that they could have Christian spouses and raise Christian families. And I think God honored their prayers, and that my mom quickly came to faith in dating my dad. And I don't know if my mom would have come to Jesus if she didn't, meet my dad. And so, like, he's clearly the person that showed her Christ. But they've told us growing up, when, my siblings and I started dating, that, it really shouldn't be an option. Like, you need to date a believer, because you want someone who ideally is stronger in their faith so they can pull you up. Right. Especially, I think when they were talking to Caitlin, my sister, and I, like, as women, we would want to marry and date someone who knows Jesus even better than us to pull us up. But I don't really know how to reconcile that, because obviously I'm glad that my dad did date my mom, and because he showed her Jesus. And maybe she wouldn't have found maybe she would have started dating a guy who didn't know Jesus, and then she would have just never found Jesus. So I don't really know how, I understand why they would want us to date Christians, but then I look at them and I'm like, well, it worked out for you guys. But it's a really slippery slope, I feel like, to go down, and it takes a really special person to start dating them, and them be like, okay, well, I don't know Jesus, but like I'm willing to try. Yes. Yeah. And so we were talking with your husband just a few minutes before we started filming this podcast episode about what he thinks about that. I don't know if you want to share what Hugh said, but everyone has different ideas on this, because it is like, in like what you were talking about earlier, I think people think, well, that's being really close-minded if you don't give someone the chance. But then you have to protect your faith and you have to protect yourself. And I don't know.
And I honestly also think that you can be unequally yoked with even believers. Like when you are both believing in God, if you were on separate paths, you know, if somebody is stronger in their faith than the other person, like that's another way to be unequally yoked. And so like life is, and like relationships are already so hard, and then to do them with somebody that doesn't fundamentally get your lifestyle, it's already going to make it 10 times harder. And also, I feel like you will be missing on a lot of blessings too, because what if that person doesn't pray for you? Like that's like the biggest gift that you could ever give somebody, or like receive from somebody in a romantic relationship, you know? And like the biggest like way to love somebody, I feel like. And you're just going to be missing on like blessings and, you know, like beautiful things that could come out of being equally yoked with somebody. But
I think the goal should always be to date. If you're a believer, you love Jesus, you follow him, the goal should always be to date someone who knows him, hopefully better even than you do. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it obviously happens where believers and unbelievers start dating, and hopefully it winds up that the one who doesn't know Jesus comes to know Jesus. And I think, you know, there's obviously going to be a spectrum, but you should be able to make that judgment call very quickly if you start talking to someone, liking someone, and they don't know Jesus. Like, if they're really open to it, then I just think you need to proceed with a lot of caution if it's someone that doesn't know Jesus. And I think ideally you don't. But obviously, it worked for my parents, and they've always coached us not to do that. But I am thankful that they did, so...
And also, you have to be such a strong person to really stand firm on, like, what you believe in and, like, what God has told us to do. Because, okay, if you're already dating somebody, you know they're going to be cute, you're going to be in love, and you're going to want to do things, you know, that this person might want to do, and they think that's okay because they don't have that, you know, that guilt or... what's another word?
Conviction.
Conviction from God. And it's so, like, that would be so hard to have somebody that you're so attracted to that you love. Like, you would have to be such a strong person and really stand firm on your beliefs to not be swayed by somebody that you love so much.
That's really
like, that would be so hard.
It's really hard as Christians, like, when you both know, well, this is not right, to continually, you know, hold that conviction close to your heart and make sure that you don't cross the line you don't want to cross. But imagine if someone had no moral compass in terms of this is right or wrong in God's eyes. It'd be really hard for those two people to agree on what's right or wrong in a relationship.
I saw a video, this guy was talking, and then he said when you're equally yoked with somebody that's a non-believer, then that is not a partnership anymore. That becomes a war. You constantly have to be like on guard and like, what does the Bible say about this? And you know, like, it's just really hard.
Yeah, that's good.
One thing that I see on social media all the time recently is that the way or the partner that you choose for yourself is a reflection of how you feel about yourself and how much you love yourself. So that's been going around like everywhere, and they're like, girls, like, you really have to like look at yourself and like how much do you really love yourself, and therefore, you know, that's gonna really show how much, and when you choose a partner, that's gonna show how much you actually love yourself. But recently, like, as we were preparing for this talk, I'm like, no, that should literally be a sign of how much God loves you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no like perfect person that you could ever choose for yourself than what God already has in store for you and who he wants you to marry. But that's, I always like, I didn't write my vows for my wedding, but like one thing that I always thought about if I were to write my vows was like, wow, God must have really loved me to give me such a special person when I met Brent. But yeah, that's who you are equally yoked with. It could be a sign of like how much God like loves you and how much of a special person like he had in mind for you.
Yeah. That's good. Back to kind of, I guess, to what I was saying earlier about how we think we've gotten so good at dating because we have so many, you know, they've got these red flags, they've got these green flags, they've got these beige flags. I think that we think we're so good at picking out someone that's perfect for us, but you're right. Obviously, only God can perfectly match a spouse for us. And, we should never try to take it like on our own to try to find someone. We should be following God's plan. And I think that requires some discernment when you're talking to someone to figure out, like, well, is this who God has for me? Because what does that even really mean? Like, how do we know that? But I think you would just know if it wasn't right. Like, something would feel off. And it might take a little while of dating them to figure that out. But I think it really should be, honestly, I think it should be clear from the start. Like, if you know that this person doesn't share the same values as you, and if you know that this person doesn't love you the way that, like, you would want a man to love you, that you would want a man to love God, then I feel like it's going to be pretty clear from the start whether or not he's the man that God has for you.
Kylie, when did you bring up God in your relationship?
So when Aaron and I started dating, that was obviously something that was brought up from the start. I don't remember, if I'm being completely honest, if it was discussed on the very first date, like a deep dive into faith. He knew that I was a Christian, and I knew that he was a Christian. Just probably, honestly, because we had talked before the first date, too. But it was a conversation that was definitely had at the beginning. And then where we were on values in terms of our Christian faith, like, because I feel like there's so many people who are, they meet and they're like, oh, we're both Christians, like, yeah, you love Jesus, I love Jesus, but then they get a few dates in and realize, oh, this person doesn't actually, like, walk the Christ walk. Like, they're okay with this and that, and they draw the line here and they draw the line there, and then those differences meet, and a lot of people end up giving into things that they don't want to give into. But I definitely had that conversation with Aaron probably second or third date, just in case we were on different pages about that. I made it very clear that, this is what I believe in, and this is because I love Jesus, like, we're not doing this and we're not doing that, and, like, this is where the line is drawn. And so the very, very early on. What about you and Brent?
Same thing with me and Brent. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was, I would say, within our first few dates. Was when I sat him down. I still remember we went to this barbecue place, and then I was like, do you believe in God? And that was one of the questions amongst, like, a bunch of other ones, because poor Brent, he probably felt like he was in an interview, but I just needed to know all these answers. And so I asked him, and then from there, then we just talked. I think we had a long talk about God, actually. And then I was like, okay, because I was already liking him by then, and I'm like, okay, well, this just makes me like him even more. But it was for sure, like, right at the beginning, which we were just talking right before we were doing this podcast about, there was another guy who I was interested in, and he had asked me to date, and I already knew he wasn't a believer, and I told him straight up, I'm like, I can't date you. Like, we don't believe in the same things, and it's not that it was going to be, like, a serious relationship anyway, but then, like, what's the point? Like, one of the things that I would always say is, when I was dating, was that I didn't want to waste my time, and I knew exactly who I wanted to marry, and what kind of person I wanted to marry, and he just wasn't it. And I don't really think there's anything wrong with just being straight up and like being so, like, honest, because then he was like, oh, okay, like, he understood, because he was also, he was a Mormon, and I feel like he was pretty strong into what he believed into. So there was no way of, like, switching, converting each other. So, and that was just a path that I didn't want to take. And I also remember giving him a Bible. But I was like, I'm still not going to date you. I'm sorry. Like,
here's what I believe. Here's why.
I was like, I hope you read this. And he was like, okay. But I don't know what I would have done if he was like, oh, if I read this, will you still go out with me? Like, I feel like that would be really hard, because I did like him, but it was just like the God thing. I would have never gotten past that.
I don't think personally I could have ever gone on a date with someone and found out that they don't believe in God, or just don't hold, like, maybe they believe in God but they don't actually have a relationship with him. I don't think I could have gone past one date with them. I really don't. But it's just such a dangerous walk to start.
No, it is.
It just means so much, and if you should always be dating with the intention of marrying that person. You shouldn't be, like, pursuing a relationship with a guy thinking, well, I don't know if he's actually husband material or not. Like, that should be clear from the start. And so it's really important to choose wisely and to choose someone who you think knows Jesus. And hopefully, like, his heart, you'll be able to see if his heart is really there for God, like, very quickly on. Because some people are good at hiding that sort of thing. Like, they put on, you know, because dating is putting your best foot forward. And so maybe a guy is telling you just what you want to hear. But that'll come to light, like, fairly quickly, I think, if he's not being genuine or if the girl's not being genuine. But
I also think this probably doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about, but I think that the way that you look at yourself and you view yourself, or, you know, through God's eyes and how he sees you, will also help you pick, like, the right partner. And, you know, like, it's okay. Like, you will go through heartbreaks and things like that, because I think about, like, going through heartbreaks, and, like, some of my friends have gone through heartbreaks, my sisters, and I'm like, that is totally fine. That wasn't the person that was meant for you. And sometimes God has to break your heart to save your soul, you know? Like, it's okay if you go through that breakup, because at the end of the day, you know, you could be finding the perfect person that God has for you, and therefore saving, like, both of your souls. Like,
that's good encouragement.
I
don't think if God, like, didn't want it to happen, like, I don't think he would. Like, there's I think there's a reason why.
If you pray, I feel like if you really pray for God to show you if that's the right person, you know, even if they're a non-believer, like, God will give you signs and God will help you. Like, I 100% believe that. And there was another person that I was interested in right before I met my husband now, and I was so in love with him. And I remember, I'm like, I like him so much, I'm gonna pray and just ask God, if this is a guy for me, like, I want him to save my life. But if he's not, then I'm like, God, just take him out of my life. And he did. And, like, 2 weeks later, I met Brent. And then that is my husband now. Like, it's like, I feel like God is so powerful. And if you ask him to give you signs and to show you things, even if it is a non-believer, like, God will show you that to you, you know? Because God could have an amazing, perfect life for that non-believer, and it could have been you. You know what I mean? So, like, it's all God's plan. You know?
You just moved your arm.
It's all part of God's plan.
You really do gotta trust him. I grew up knowing that praying for my spouse is something that I should start young. Like, I should start praying about whoever God has for me, starting in high school, definitely in college. But I really didn't start doing that until right before I met Aaron. And so I, like, was really committed to praying every night, like, God, show me who you want, you know, me to marry one day. Show me who you want me to date. If, you know, he's out there, like, I'll take him now. Like, and I started praying that, Aaron and I met in 2021. I probably started praying that sometime in 2020. And then, then I met him in 2021. So God honored that prayer. I think it's important to start talking to God about that. Like, as soon as you feel the desire to, Mike, her cat's meowing. As soon as you feel the desire to start, you know, dating and start whatever.
Or even if you're in a relationship and you don't know if it's, like, the right one to be in, and be like, okay, God, like, you will have such a, like, a feeling and discernment, and I feel like you will know. And if not, then God will show you signs. And if you really like that person and you just aren't sure of a couple of things about them, and then he will show you and he'll let you know.
Yeah, I've prayed that prayer a lot before too. But if he's not for me, I guess take him out. I don't think I've ever told Aaron that. He's gonna be listening like, what? You prayed and asked him?
Well, he's still in your life.
Yes,
so.
he is. But I definitely have said that prayer many times, because I was, you know, I've questioned it before too. Like, I want to make, like, feel like this is right, but I don't know how God feels. Like, I want to make sure that, you know, this is who God has for me. So I've prayed that a lot for him too. And Aaron's still there, so
it must be a sign.
He's gonna be so annoyed that we're talking about him so much.
That's okay.
What the heck?
That's okay. Yeah. But also, I feel like that just shows, like, how much you love God and you love yourself, that you're willing to. I would be willing to give up, like, anybody if I felt like God told me that wasn't the right person. Yeah. You know, and.
It really, like we said earlier, it's the second most important relationship decision you'll make in your life is who you'll choose as your spouse. And I had some other verses I was going to read. A lot of these verses I feel like are ones that you hear at a wedding ceremony. But the language in it is interesting because the first verse that we opened with, that 1 Corinthians 6:14, talking about not being yoked together with unbelievers, that word yoked that we discussed, that's such a strong word, right? Like, it's something that's binding. It's something that, you know, joins people together, because that's what marriage is. Like, it's a unifying relationship where, like, the two become one. And so I was going to read these verses just that further illustrate, like, how serious it is and how much, like, that other person will influence you, and, you know, just what that means. So Genesis 2:24 says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Obviously, I feel like everyone's heard that verse, because that's what happens when you get married. It's, you know, the two become one. 1 Corinthians 7:39 says, a wife is bound to her husband as long as she lives. That's like, you know, some serious language. Mark 10:4 says, what therefore God has joined together, let man not separate. So just further illustrating, you know, how serious of a relationship it is, and how important it is to have the same values, so that you can, you know, be unified in every way together, and to be, you know, but both individually pursuing Christ, and then also pursuing Christ as a couple, and leading the other person towards more holiness and closer to God.
That was really good. So I think that wraps up this episode. This one came out a few days late because we had some stuff going on Friday, but hopefully we can still keep up our episodes every Friday. We have been talking about creating an email if you guys want to email us with any questions, or if you want to correct us on anything or anything else, encouragement.
Yeah,
we can do that as well. So we'll put that on our website for you guys. But yeah, we will see you in the next episode.